Well, that was fun, Panther fans. Remember back in 2021, those 3 weeks where we were the talk of the league for having such a good hockey team, and nothing could go wrong. Well, here we are. Under the category of videos I really don't want to make, you can file this one as Exhibit A. Now, it might take me a minute and a half to get to where I'm going here at the end of this video because I just spent the last couple hours reading that report over and over. The pertinent parts is what I reread. What I will say, though, is that if you can't wait to where I get at the end, don't bother watching the first 5 minutes because then you're going to make judgments based on a third of the story, which is a lot of what I see going on Twitter right now. Also, for you cancel culture kids who are no doubt watching in an attempt to find something I say that you can misconstrue and therefore attempt to build your brand by disparaging mine, I will say 3 things. First of all, I was molested by my male babysitter multiple times as a child, so I kind of know that angle. Secondly, as a male massage therapist who's not exactly tall or big, I actually know what it's like to be in a situation where somebody much larger than you is making a sexual advance and you're pretty afraid to say no. Now I understand in that context this was reversed, but the point is I understand being afraid to say no about what might happen. And from Aldrich's point of view, who I'm not defending in any shape or form, I do know what it's like to hide parts of my sexuality for long periods of time out of fear for what people are going to think or say about me. So the point being, if you have a personal issue with me, save yourself the trouble and hit the back button. Now, on to Q. My phone exploded, and yeah, I see what's going on. Now, obviously, I'd already known about the whole thing with the Blackhawks, and I knew that there was a possibility that Q may or may not be involved in one way, shape, or form or another. I, like my friend Jack on Twitter, like to wait for the facts of the situation to come out. So, upon looking at Twitter, and I'm seeing everybody basically saying Q is gone, Q is gone, and from the snippets that I read on Twitter, it doesn't look good. Don't look good, right? So, first thing I'll say is the report was written by like a 5th grader. From the investigative end, they say a lot of things without really saying anything. There's huge questions that are left unanswered by this report. It's horrible. The details of this report should have been 3 times as long. I should not have been able to sit there in 2 hours and read the pertinent 70 pages or so and reread what needed to be reread. So I'm going to take this in segments because there's multiple things here. The first thing I'll say is that regardless of whatever happened in terms of what Q and McDonough and everybody that was involved at the higher ups, regardless of what they knew, which way the story goes, Aldrich should have been immediately fired. So let's just start there. Even if even if some of the accounts are accurate or inaccurate, and I'm going to get into that, he should have instantly been fired. That's a no-brainer here. Okay. Now, as far as the report is, now this is not the lawyer's fault, but they interviewed a hell of a lot of people and nobody has the same story. Nobody has the same story, including the confidant to John Doe. Even he has a different story when he's relaying what John Doe told him, his story doesn't match what John Doe's story is. Nobody's story matches in terms of what went on in the meeting. But there's one thing that I found that significantly leaves out a huge question. It leaves out a massive amount of context. And here's what it is. Now, before I say this, I want everybody to understand. I'm reading this report from the point of view of trying to find something that I can point to and say, okay, yeah, this is why Q should be fired. Because that's the going, if you go on Twitter, that's what everybody wants, right? Not everybody. I shouldn't say everybody. The mob wants him fired. So I read the report from the POV of, from taking it like devil's advocate. It's like, okay, what can I find in this report that validates that? So I wasn't reading it trying to exonerate him. So I'm going to fast forward to the most important part in terms of the context of Q. So what I'm saying here now is specifically regarding Q. What did he know? When did he know it? And should this be an issue? And this comes to the part where the stories that people are telling don't match. Now, the mental health coach, I think is what they call him. The guy's last name is Gary. Gary is the first one that John Doe talked to in the organization. Okay? John Doe went to Gary. This is the first one that he talked to. And right off the bat, we have a massive problem. Because the way the report is worded, John Doe's testimony is that he went to Gary and told him the entire story of the sexual interaction. That's how it is presented in the report by a lawyer. John Doe told Gary the entire story. Define entire story. And why I'm asking for that to be explained is because Gary's testimony and the testimony, one of the only things that match in terms of everybody that was in that meeting, Gary's testimony says that he was basically told that Aldridge was coming on to him, had made advances, that he had told John Doe that it could basically affect his playing time, his playing this career. So, not defending that behavior, but what I'm saying is that according to Gary, he went into the meeting and told Bowman and McDonough and everybody, he told them that basically it had been sexual harassment. Nobody in that meeting at any time was told or had knowledge of that an actual sexual interaction had happened. Yet, again, when you read the report, and I beg you to read the report, John Doe's testimony says that he told Gary the entire story. Which leaves, what does the entire story mean, completely up to interpretation by the reader. It alludes to the idea that John Doe told Gary that there had been unconsensual sex. But according to Gary and anybody else that was in that meeting, that was not discussed. Now, again, remember, I'm taking this from the point of view of that meeting, what was discussed and what did anybody know. So the point is that everybody wants to, not everybody, I got to stop saying everybody. The mob wants Q to be fired because the position is that Q knew that the kid had been, that he had sex forced upon him. Okay? But everybody, I gotta stop saying everybody. The report is so inconsistent. It's a damn hard job to try to make sense of it. The people that want Q fired are thinking about it from the point of view that Q knew Aldrich had forced himself on to John Doe and the sexual actions happened. But that's not the case, because in his testimony, Gary says he went to the meeting, and basically what he told the people in the meeting was that Aldrich had made advances, that John Doe had turned him down, and that Aldrich had said that he could, harm his career. Now, that being said, that's bad enough. I'm not defending that. What I'm saying is we need to be clear, and this is where the report is really, really bad. We need to be clear on what everybody in that meeting was being told by Gary, because Gary was the one relaying the message from John Doe. So we can criticize the people in that meeting and how they reacted in that moment, but we can only criticize them from the point of view of what they actually knew. So if nobody in that meeting knew at that point that an actual, event had happened, then we cannot have expected them to act as though an actual event had happened. Now, we get to the second part of this where Q wasn't even there for the first half of the meeting. They actually started the meeting and then it said, hey, why don't we get Coach in here? So he came in late. Now, if you listen to what Q said in his testimony, he was basically told, and this is his testimony now, he was just basically told that something had happened, something might have happened. He was not given any of the specifics of it. And the interesting thing is that everybody else but McDonough in the meeting, when the meeting ended, everybody had the assumption that McDonough was going to take care of it, except McDonough's saying, I don't remember that. I don't remember that. And where are we getting this idea that Q just wanted to sweep it all under the rug? The only way we're getting that is from Bowman and McDonough saying they kind of remember Q saying something to the effect of. So we're supposed to just flush Joel Quenneville down the toilet based on hearsay that these two guys that don't have the same story, that don't have the story right with anything else in terms of their actions after it was, everything finally came out. We're literally going to flush him down the toilet because of the words of Bowman and McDonough? Because that's the only place in the report it's even alluded to that was Q's reaction. If you read Q's testimony, basically for him, he's called in from the locker room, completely, his mind is on hockey. For him, he's hearing that this something might have happened, that might have happened, and that McDonough's going to take care of it. He left the meeting and figured that's what was going to happen. Now, if you want to say at that point Q was wrong for not insisting that Aldrich be fired, you have an argument. You have a completely valid argument there. But we cannot judge him for reacting to something that he didn't know. We can talk about his actions based on what he did know. That's fine. I totally agree. I said at the beginning, Aldrich should have just been immediately fired. Immediately. Now, if they wanted to keep it quiet, they could have just, people sign non-disclosures all the time. They could have easily just fired him, given some other reason, and then dealt with the public reaction to everything after the playoffs and everything. So if you want to criticize Q for not insisting that he be fired, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Everybody else in the room, and probably should have thought the same thing. But you have to keep in mind at that moment, okay, at that moment, no investigation had been done. So the point I'm making is that nobody in that room knew exactly what had really transpired. And the version of events that John Doe has, the version of events that his confidant has, the version of events that Aldrich has, and the version of events that the woman that was purportedly with them, there's 4 stories there and none of them match, including to the point where John Doe's allegation doesn't even include or involve the fact or the idea that there was a woman there and they had been having sex. And then if you continue to read further, you get testimony from other players where there's even different versions of the story. Now, I have no doubt something happened. That's abundantly clear, and with what Aldrich has proven to be later on, I'm not saying that John Doe is making anything up. We all can have something happen and have a memory lapse here or there. It does concern me why in his initial bringing things that it was not brought to the attention of the investigators that there was a woman there. He left that out. But I don't know him personally. Maybe he had a girlfriend, or maybe he was married, right? Or maybe at least he had a girlfriend and he didn't want the girl to know that he'd been with another woman. It's possible. Okay? So the point there is that I'm not victim blaming. Clearly something happened. But no 2 stories are accurate, including, depending on whose version of events you believe, it was either John Doe and Aldrich or John Doe, Aldrich, and a woman. And then, once you investigate, they found the woman and they asked her, and she openly admits what happened between the 3 of them, and that version of events does not match what John Doe says. So, and her version of events doesn't match what Aldrich says either. It's a mess. So taking all that into consideration, I'm looking at this specifically, this part is, what did Coach know? What did Q know? And by Gary's own testimony, at worst, Q knew that sexual harassment had taken place. Okay? There's no testimony from anybody that an assault was discussed in that meeting. As far as everybody's testimony is concerned, the worst thing that was discussed was sexual harassment. And I'm not saying that that's okay. I'm just saying if you want to judge Coach, you judge him on what he didn't do knowing there was sexual harassment, because he didn't know at that point in time that there had been an assault. So we cannot judge the man for not taking action on something that he was unaware of. And as far as Gary's testimony, nobody in that room was aware that there was an actual assault that had happened. Somewhere something happened, because John Doe is saying that the lawyer worded it, John Doe told Gary the entire sexual interaction. So they don't even give us the details of what John Doe said. They did not, the lawyer did not say to John Doe, can you tell us exactly what you told him? What do you mean by the entire sexual allegation? It's horribly, horribly done. Anybody who reads it and reads it again says, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? That should be explained, because that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. So whatever John Doe told Gary, Gary went and told everybody in that meeting about sexual harassment, not sexual assault. So, now, for the rest of it, how they didn't just fire Aldrich on the spot immediately is nothing anybody will ever understand. Yeah, I know you're in the middle of playoffs and all of that, but geez, you just fire him. You just fire him. And I'm not saying that should have been the end of it either, but in that moment, you call him into the office, you say, there's this allegation, we're going to fire you, but you have to look at it from the team's point of view at that point from two things. One part where they want to keep it quiet, they don't want to disrupt team chemistry. I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying that that's the space that we're in. And the other part to that goes, at this point, it's still just he said, she said. In terms of that meeting, in terms of what the team is hearing, it's still this person saying this happened. And you have to also keep in mind that what if they fire Aldrich and he's gay, and then it turns out that just didn't happen the way that John, in that space of time. Obviously, we know pretty much what happened now. But I'm talking about the state of the mind of the people in that room. You can't just really go firing people on one allegation unless you at least investigate it and talk to Aldrich. So I would completely understand that if he got fired. I also think at the very least, they should have put him on what? Unpaid leave, paid leave, take a pick, and investigated it. So I'm totally in agreement with the fact that this should have been investigated right then and there. I mean, starting right then and there. There should have been an investigation. Now, from Q's point of view, and that's what I'm interested in terms of this video and in this moment. In terms of what Joel Quenneville knew, he was called into a meeting at an odd time. He arrived late. He didn't really know what was going on. He was told there might have been an incident, or there's an allegation of an incident between these two. And at the end, everybody was under the assumption that McDonough was going to handle it, except for McDonough. It's not. Q should not be fired for this, and he sure as hell shouldn't be canceled for that. For that. What happened afterwards is a massive undertaking. Because nobody's memories, surprisingly, nobody has the same memory. Okay? Everybody's story is different. And the lawyers, in my opinion, did a piss poor job of digging into those stories deeper to try to get more details of things that may or may not have happened so they could have a clearer picture of what happened. And then when you read their conclusion, it reads like somebody's blog post. It's terrible work. The idea that I get the fact that it took a long time to collect the witnesses and everything like that, but in terms of the details of the report, it's horrible. It's like done by a 5th grader, and not even a good 5th grader, like that C+ student. Terribly done. Way too many holes. And when you have that many inconsistencies in people's stories, you have to dig deeper, and they didn't. They didn't. So my conclusion as far as where I'm at right now, I do not feel Q should be fired. I'm just going to stay with that right now, because in terms of for his behavior in that meeting, if he was under the assumption that McDonough was going to take care of it, and then it wasn't very long after the playoffs that Aldrich got fired, so at that point Q was probably, he's the coach of the team, he's probably feeling he's safe to assume it got taken care of. Right? No, there were no other meetings, nothing else happened, which is indefensible. But that's on McDonough. And that's where it gets to me, because everybody, the people in the meeting all saying the assumption was that he was going to take care of it. Except for him, he said, no, I didn't say that. What? Wasn't supposed to be me. But half of the testimony disparaging Q is coming from him. So consider the source. The two people saying that Q, wanted to basically, paraphrase, wanted to sweep it under the rug, whatever, however they worded it, is Bowman and McDonough. So we're going to take their word when the report itself leaves absolute Grand Canyon-sized holes into what was actually discussed in that meeting. This report, in my opinion, makes the situation for everybody worse. It's terrible. It's an awful job. So, now, in terms of Aldridge, gosh, there's just so much impossible. How do you not immediately start an investigation? How do you not immediately, at the very least, put him on leave, completely separate him from the players and everything like that? How much of that is Q's responsibility? That is a viable question. That's a viable question. But nowhere in, and this again, I'm going back to the report, nowhere in the report do they lay out, do they ask anybody, whose responsibility is this? Whose responsibility is that? So we're all left to stay on Twitter and be like, well, Q should have known, Q should have done something. Anybody who's ever worked for a big company, and that's what a hockey team is a big company, you know that certain people have certain responsibilities and everybody's super busy and you do your responsibility. And if so-and-so says they're going to take care of it, or it's so-and-so's job, you pretty much leave it alone because you got your own pile that you got to take care of. So we're all left to wonder for ourselves, and everybody will just, people will say, well, he's the head coach, he should have known. But that's not entirely how it works. That's why they have mental health coaches and human resources and other positions in the organization. Most of which is their job to report to the coach, this is what's happening. So as far as he knows, he went to the meeting, they told him the incident may have happened, no, there was no talk of a sexual assault, McDonough was going to handle it, and Q went back to the locker room to deal with the hockey end of things. I don't see how you can cancel and fire this man for that, unless you're just really, 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 really hardcore looking to find some way, somehow, that he could be blamed. Not in that moment. Not in the moment of that meeting. I'm sorry. And then you heard, what he said. After that, he didn't hear, see, know anything about it. Now, again, if you want to criticize him for that, is that fair or is it not fair? We just assume as outsiders that that's the head coach's responsibility, but is it? Is it? All those questions were completely left unanswered. This is one of the worst pieces of investigative, if you want to call it, it's just horribly done. It was horribly done. It's an insult to fifth graders that I say was done by fifth graders. So many unanswered questions, so many things still left to public opinion and innuendo and alluding to what somebody said and not getting full and complete answers. Even if the answers were, I don't know, I don't remember. It was crap. This report is crap. And I do not want Joel Quenneville canceled and fired over this report. Because this report was terribly done. And leaves way too many details out because apparently it's too stupid to ask the right questions. Now, if it comes out Anybody in that organization that actually had knowledge that a sexual assault had taken place and they didn't take action, yeah, kaputs, gone, goodbye, adios. That part, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And if the report specifically laid out where Quenneville knew that an assault had taken place and shoved it under the rug, adios, kaputs, not a problem. No problem with that whatsoever. But that's not what this report says. As bad as the cancel people wanted to say that, it's not what it says. It's not what that report says. That report is garbage. It's garbage. Absolute garbage. So, that's it. You know, that's it. Aldrich clearly did a lot of wrong things. Obviously. Okay? But we don't know exactly, we still don't know exactly what happened. Now, because, and here's why I'm saying that. If you take the words of John Doe as the only source of believable information, let's say that you want to take his words, what he's saying as that's exactly what happened and everybody else has it wrong. That still leaves his confidant telling a different story, and that still leaves the woman that was allegedly there with a different story. So the point there is that there's so many different stories, and look at it this way. Look at it this way. Everybody is up in arms that the Black Hawk organization didn't do an investigation, and I agree with that. I agree with that. But this investigation that these lawyers did was garbage. It's crap. It still leaves half the questions unanswered. So this is the result of an investigation. We really don't know who knew what, or when they knew it, or how they knew it, or how it was told, because nobody's got the same story. So we want to fire and cancel people? Aldrich is going to get his day. Aldrich is going to get his day. Anybody that knew there was an assault, it didn't do anything, kaputs. But that's my line. If you want to say Q should have done something more, it's fine to have that opinion. Everybody's got opinions. But where's the investigation, or where is the layout of whose responsibility it really is in the NHL world and in that realm? We don't know. We sit there on Twitter, we say, well, he's the head coach, he should have known. That's not how it always works. It's not how it always works. And he didn't know. In that meeting, he didn't know. And he thought it was being taken care of, and that was that. And I have no reason not to believe that, because of all the stories, that's like the only thing that everybody that was in that room agrees to, is that sexual harassment was discussed, but nobody was talking about sexual assault. That's the only thing everybody agrees to. And then I'm sure some people will say, well, they're all lying to cover it up. Well, you know, there's only so much anybody can uncover unless they're willing to really, really dig deep and really press people and go out on a limb and ask the questions that nobody wants to ask. But in this day and age, if you ask the questions that nobody wants to ask, you get friggin' canceled. Some of you people are your own worst enemy, because half the people that would be willing to do investigative journalism to find out the truth are so freaking petrified of saying one wrong word that they get it wrong and they get canceled. That's half the freaking problem. So, comment section should be fun. Based on that report, I do not believe Joel Quenneville should be fired. If they do further investigating and we find out that they knew about a sexual assault in that meeting, kaputs, fine, no problem. But that is not what that report says. Read the report. read it twice, and then read the parts that you don't understand 3 times. And it's not your fault that you don't understand it. The reason why you don't understand it is everybody has a different story, and the investigator in this case sucked. They did not ask the right questions, they didn't ask enough questions, and there's clarity on nothing. Very little clarity at all. So as far as I'm concerned right now, the story's not even over yet. That was, the report's garbage. Report's garbage. All right. We got hockey tomorrow. Hopefully. Hopefully Q is still the coach. I said it.